Hey YouTube, here we have a John Deere JX75 lawnmower. It features a blade brake clutch, and on this particular one, the bearing at the bottom of the blade brake clutch needs to be replaced. It's rough turning, it's still working, but I want to make a video and show you how to go about taking the blade brake clutch off, at least the bottom half of it, and replace the bearing inside of it. So I flipped the lawnmower on its side, carburetor up, and underneath what you're looking at in the center is the part of the blade brake clutch that you attach the blade to, and that needs to be removed because the bearing is right underneath that bolt. So to remove that bolt right there, you need an 8mm hex wrench. The part that's a little tricky here is you need to keep the shaft of the engine from moving as you try and take off this bolt. Otherwise, as you spin it, it'll spin the engine crankshaft. So insert your 8mm hex wrench. You'll need a 10mm socket to remove the recoil from the top of the engine. Once you remove all these nuts, just pull the recoil right off. All the studs and sleeves will be right there. You noticed in the center of the engine there is a bolt going through the top of the crankshaft. That is where you're going to put your 19mm socket. And this is what you're going to use to hold the crankshaft from spinning as you try and remove the hex 8mm hex nut from the bottom of the engine, the crankshaft. That's holding on the blade brake clutch. So now that I have the socket on the top of the crankshaft, I'm going to try and turn the 8mm hex wrench. Alright, so I broke that free. As I loosen this, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a spring in between that tightens the clutch plate against the bottom of the blade brake clutch. That friction disc is used to stop the blades when you disengage the lever, which loosens the cable and allows this whole mechanism to come apart. Come apart, so it opens up, which pushes down this piece right here to the top of this piece and will press against this disc and ultimately slow down and stop the blade from spinning. And then when engaged, these two pieces will come together. It'll lift this part upward, removing the friction from this and allowing there to be a little gap, which then allows the blade to spin. Alright, so now I have the bottom half of the blade brake clutch in a vise, and I removed the top and bottom bearing covers so you can see the ball bearings. I'm not going to reuse this bearing as it's pretty much worn out, and also to get this thing out, I'm more than likely going to damage it pretty badly. So in this case, I'm going to use a handheld mallet. I'm not sure what we actually call this thing, but it is a large piece of metal tie rod looking thing. Alright, the bearing has been removed. I picked up some Warrior 6-piece wire wheel and cup brush set. Item number is 60 JX7475. This was from Harbor Freight, and the top left wire wheel fits perfectly in that hole. So I'm going to remove that from the package, put it in my drill. So you can see in the place where the bearing seats, it's fairly rusty. I'm sure moisture, being that this is in a lawnmower, has gotten in there over the years and caused it to be a little more difficult to get that bearing out. So what I want to do is get rid of that rust, clean it up a little in there, and then re-grease it and put the new bearing in. So I've attached the wire brush, or I should say wire wheel, on this drill. Threw it on high, and gonna see how well it does the job. See, it fits perfectly in there. So as you can see, after running the wire wheel through there, it's nice and clean, shiny, it looks like brand new. So I'm just gonna wipe off some rubbing alcohol, put some grease on there, and then put in the new bearing. I got a piece of paper towel, threw some rubbing alcohol on there, and I'm gonna clean up the inside before I grease it. So I'm gonna use some Lucas Red and Tacky No. 2 grease to put inside of the bearing. I purchased a brand new Nachi Quest bearing. This is the original bearing that was on this blade brake clutch. The model number is 62052NSE. I purchased it from BDI. So I'm going to take this out of the packaging. As you can see, this is the brand new bearing. You could put this bearing in either way, as it's sealed on both sides. Now I'm going to tap this bearing in. Now that the bearing has been seated, I'm just going to give it a spin and show you how smooth it is. Close-up shot of the new bearing. See, it's seated right down to that little lip. And be sure not to get any grease on this red area, because this is the friction disc, and if you get any grease, WD-40, or anything really that shouldn't be on there, it's going to not be as effective and potentially not make the blade stop adequately. So make sure to clean this off with like rubbing alcohol. Now we're going to put the bottom half of the blade brake clutch back on. We're first going to put our 19mm socket in the recoil. Now we're going to reinstall the bottom half of the brand new bearing this way. And gonna put the 8mm hex bolt back in here. When I tighten this bolt, it'll put tension on this spring. This spring will put tension on the clutch disc right here, which had that red material to press against here. When that presses here, it'll stop. You'll also notice right here, this whole assembly is going to move up as I tighten it down. So you can see it start to compress. Alright, I'm going to grab my socket. And now this is tightened, you can remove the 8mm hex wrench. You can see that it's been compressed because of this gap right here, and you can also see the spring. And there's a lot tougher to turn because now it's pressing up with the spring tension against the bottom of this plate, which is going to obviously stop the blade when you disengage the clutch. For those of you that are interested in how the blade brake clutch works, right now I have the clutch engaged. If I spin this, you're gonna see the entire part where the blade would fasten is spinning. So right now the clutch is engaged, so the blade is spinning. But when I disengage the clutch, now you'll notice just the center piece spins. So this allows the engine shaft to spin with the engine remain running, while this part, which would have the blade fastened to it with these two bolts, would remain stationary. So this one is going to give you that safety feature, and two, going to allow you to disengage the clutch, allow you to have the engines running without the blade spinning, so you can change the bag or walk away from the mower and safely have it running. So hopefully you guys learned something from this. Pretty neat setup. I really enjoy mowers with this feature as opposed to ones where you have to always hold down the clutch to start the engine. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This video is going to apply to a John Deere pretty much 14SB, 14SE, JX75, JE75, or JX85. There's probably some other models. I think like the 12PC or something like that. Another John Deere that has a blade brake clutch. And any of them that have this style are all going to be the same. So hopefully this is informative to you guys. Just so you know, just this bottom part that I took off is $50. This bearing cost me $10.70 with tax. So substantially less money to replace the bearing. Obviously a little more involved, but well worth the money. Save $40 and I got a brand new blade brake clutch. Thanks guys.